Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee. Everything School HQ. Many forget, but not on this very program. We never forget where Everything School HQ resides, where the Tennessee Volunteers come away with a strong victory over the UTSA Roadrunners, even with the 19th McCown popping in the fray in the third quarter to try and make things interesting, with a perfect quarter, really, for the Roadrunners. But it was to no avail for those UTSA Roadrunners, because they go down to the Tennessee Volunteers, that we'll get into in a little bit. But before we do any deep dives into the Tennessee Volunteers, which is what people tune into this very program for, primarily Tennessee Volunteers all the time on the College Football Show, here with fellow University of North Georgia alumni Matt Green. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. I hope you don't alienate all of the listeners this early in the pod, thinking it's just going to be all Tennessee. Hopefully we can get it out of the way and talk about real college football.
Real college football. Wow. I mean, all eyes are going to be on.
I'm not going to pretend to have watched much of this UTSA Tennessee game, so I'll wait for your synopsis to make my opinion.
Okay. Well, we have time, and just like that, we did not. My wife and I, we walked out of. We saw The Haunting of Venice on late Saturday night, and Georgia's on the highlights, and they're up like 42-14 against UAB. And she was like, "Oh, don't you want to watch this game? Like, why are you watching you?" And I was like, I didn't need to watch UGA UAB. What are we talking about? What?" It was funny. And she was like, "Oh, UAB, are they not good?" No, they're not. It's not a whole thing.
No, so weird to play someone like UAB a second time in what, 3 years? Like the Ball State one, that was the rushed one where like they had to cancel the Oklahoma game, but this was already playing Ball State twice, or UAB. At least they're not going at UAB like Alabama over here, going at South Florida. But
I actually disagree. I think that would have been cooler. That would have been a fun.
No.
That would have been a more interesting matchup. Like, that's more interesting.
I'm sure UAB would get like half of the money that they would get for than coming to Athens to get that beat down. But yeah, Trent Dilfer was, I don't know, something like, he's respectful, but he was way too excited for that game.
All right. Well, Matt Green, week 4 of the college football season in the books. I'm very excited for this program for a multitude of reasons, not just because I love talking college football with you twice a week during the college football season, but it's because I know Matt Green. I was doing the math late last night on how our picks and how our spreads ended up going. And unfortunately for that man down there in Tequila, Georgia, it was a rough weekend for him. If I recall.
No, it was not, sir. It was a fantastic weekend for yourself, but
that's where we're going.
I'll go ahead and get this.
What made it great for Chase Thomas here?
It definitely was Chase Thomas's weekend, but against the spread, believe it or not, we were tied. We both went 6-4-1 against the spread this week, so I gained no ground on you there. You got a 2-game lead against the spread, but you went 10-1 overall on the weekend. Only loss would have been who?
Which
UCLA.
Wasn't a loss. 14-7 was my upset pick of the week, and UCLA right there in a dogfight. And if you don't throw a pick 6 to open the game, you're looking at overtime.
Hey, I mean, how do you think I feel over here? My 2 upsets of the picks of the week. Clemson, 28-yarder. They just have right there to beat Florida State. Should have had it. Notre Dame, we'll obviously get into that, but the 3rd and 19 late, like for Notre Dame to let that one slip away, like it felt like the Bush push game all over again. But yeah, so super close. So Notre Dame was 3.5. So against the spread, that was a win for me. But yeah, unfortunately, didn't get that one overall. But yeah, I went 8-3 overall on the weekend to your 10-1. It was a solid week, but nothing compared to Chase Thomas over there. So you now have a 1-game lead on me overall in 2 games against the spread. So still early.
Many are saying I went 11-0 because I did a service to Chip Kelly and his football acumen, where I said, look, true freshman on the road, like that was me just believing in Chip. And I was right, because a lot of people were like, Utah just going to drub them. And you're like, a lot of people were circling that one and like, they can't go on the road and beat this Utah team. My whole thing on Utah was,
they did cover, though.
Believer. They did not, but I'm not a believer in this year's Utah team. I think they're very beatable. And then you look at it on UCLA side, they're cooking with something. And Dante Moore is going to be a really good player, and that was invaluable experience for him to go into Utah and experience that and play pretty well by and large.
I mean, Utah shut him out for 55 minutes or something in this game.
Played well. Did you watch it? 300
they
yards,
dominated.
I think, for Dante Moore. I don't think so. I wouldn't say domination.
I mean, the defense kept him out of the end zone basically the entire game until 5 minutes left. I don't know whenever they scored.
I don't know, man. Dante Moore has an 87.3 PFF grade and 9.4% big time throw rate, which is 8th in the Power 5. And he had some big ones in this one too. I don't know. I just I'm high on the Bruins over the next couple of years, and I think they're doing some good stuff over there with Chip Kelly, one of the more underrated coaches in college football. But Matt
underrated.
Green,
you're over here impressed with Chip Kelly. After Kyle Whittingham just gutted out another win with that starting quarterback. Put some respect on Kyle Whittingham, sir.
Kyle Whittingham's a great coach, top 10 too. But Chip Kelly, people forget about Chip. And I want to see Kyle Whittingham do it at Oregon and UCLA. He's done it at Utah. Let me see Kyle Whittingham in the SEC. I want to see him more in the Big Ten. He probably fits more in the Big Ten. But I don't know. I like them both. They're both good.
I guess he's going to fit in the Big 12 next year.
That's true. Matt Green, your green line stat of the weekend is what, sir?
I don't even know where to go with this, but let's go to Iowa Penn State for the green line stat of the week. What stat do you want, sir? Where do I start? Do you want to start with the 0 points? Do you want to start with the 76 total yards, with the 4 turnovers? How about 4 first downs in an entire football game? Like, I've seen a few people throwing this stat out, but have you seen the total plays from this game? It's absolutely ridiculous.
Okay,
Penn State ran 97 offensive plays to 33 for Iowa. It's like 45-15 time of possession. Like,
yeah,
this is so we can just get into this game. Honestly, I feel like I was drives in this game: punt, fumble, punt, 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 fumble, punt, fumble. And there's also a punt that hit the guy's back at some point. Not a muffed punt, but end result the same, and turn the ball over that way too. It was like, that's that paradox of what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Like something's got to give. That was the exact opposite of this game. It was an amazing defense, maybe the best defense in college football, versus one of the worst offenses in all of Power 5. And it went exactly as you would expect. Like, you can say, like, oh, Penn State, they haven't played a good offense. But it's like, this defense is just rowdy. And this terrible offense did exactly what you would expect against maybe the best defense in college football.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that they went into this game 131st in total first downs. The Iowa Hawkeyes.
Is that bad?
It's not good. What more can you say? Like, Cade McNamara obviously not fixing the problem here, but I look at it less from Iowa's perspective because, look, Iowa, before the year I said that they're just still going to sleepwalk into a lot of wins because the schedule's pretty nice for them still. Like, even after this one, like, the schedule's not bad and the defense wasn't bad. The defense was solid. It's just not the Iowa defense of 2 years ago where it could, like, just the unreal best in the Big Ten. Like, you just can't do anything against them. They're a top 20 defense in the country. Like, this is still a good Iowa defense, borderline great, but they're not elite. And the only way for this Iowa team to function to 9 to 10 wins is the defense has to be top 5. The defense has to be otherworldly in takeaways. The defense has to give super short fields and score touchdowns. The defense has to score touchdowns with what Iowa's working with.
And the offense has to help them out a little bit. Don't just give the other team short fields with the turnovers. Like, they can't run the ball. Like, that's the one thing with a lot of these the Stone Age offense type of deal. Like what people hate on those type of teams. It's like, but they're based on running the ball. Like if you can run the ball, you can play that dominant defense, play keep away or whatever. But they can't even run the ball, and that's why like Brian Ferentz, why was this man pounding his chest last week? Who'd they beat? Like Western Carolina or something, some sort of directional school, right? Last week. And so they were at 85 points through 3 games. So I think they were sitting at like 28 points a game. Now, after getting blanked 31-0, like now you're under the target and everybody knows about it. And like, why even say anything the week before? Maybe the best team on your entire schedule.
No, that's fair. So when you think about this game, outside of Iowa and the offense being terrible, and like I alluded to with the defense, and still the defense is good and it's going to keep them in a lot of games the rest of the way, I take of this more, and also we should mention that it was like a hurricane in the second half. It was one of those monsoon type situations where that was part of the reason for the disparity. Not the whole reason, but the second half did get really crazy in terms of weather and conditions for this one. Also, great venue. I just love the whiteout at Penn State. It's a great look on TV, and it's just it's like one of those bucket list type environments, I think, for every college football fan, because it really is something else to see on the big screen. But my biggest thing is like this is a statement victory for Penn State. I don't know if you agree with this, Matt Green, but 31-0, blanking him. We talked about it going into this game where I was like the under talked about. Everyone's just focusing on Drew Aller and this offense, but it's really the Penn State defense, which is a top 5 elite defense in the country. So you're looking at it where Drew Aller's going to only get better and the offense is only going to get better because it really hasn't had any explosive plays to this point, and it wasn't like they really had a bunch here against Iowa. The offense is the last thing that we're waiting on with Penn State, and we know it's coming. What we didn't know was that this Penn State defense was going to be this good, and this Penn State defense is college football playoff good when you match it with the offense that they're going to be working with down the stretch. So I look at this more than anything as like a big statement win for Penn State that like we're not playing with our food with Iowa, we're not playing our food with Purdue or something else. Like this team is like no. It kind of reminds me of the Michigan jump where they're just taking care of business against teams that are inferior than them in the Big Ten, and that's just their season relies on 2 games, and it's Michigan and Ohio State. That's their year, but they're not gonna. I don't think we're gonna see Penn State in any dogfights and any mess of a game this year. They're in the Big Ten. I don't know if you agree with that, but it feels like that's what this game showed me more than anything else. Is they're not going to fall victim to previous Penn State teams where they just kind of play down to their competition.
If you're saying in terms of the inferior competition, like they're going to get in some dogfights with Ohio State and Michigan. Right. But in terms of everybody else, it feels like they're a level above and they're kind of showing it. Like, for those that picked Penn State to win the Big Ten preseason, despite Ohio State's big win, I think you got to be feeling good about them through the first 4 games.
Well, speaking of Ohio State, let's go to Ohio State, Matt Green, where, this is one of the, you alluded to the Bush push, and that was my first thought, and a lot of other folks when you saw the end of this game and how it unfolded. But the Bush push, Notre Dame fans could be mad at officials. They could be mad at USC. In this situation, they're mad at their coaching staff, where they had 10 men on the field, Matt Green, not once, twice. Coming out of a timeout, they still had 10 men on the field. And then you have your coach after the game saying you don't want to risk the penalty by sending the guy out there. Here's the thing. They can only move the ball half a foot if you get called for a penalty. Like, you're already on the 1. What are you worried about?
If you realize it, you got to run out there.
Yes, 1,000%. Once is bad. Twice is unconscionable in this kind of scenario. When you're making this kind of money, when you're on this kind of stage, I don't know how you come back from that. You lose so much trust with the fans. You lose so much trust from just the past horrors of Notre Dame football and big games. You're right there. Like, you should have won this game. Ohio State gave you every opportunity to win this football game, Matt Green, and they just gave it away. And look, Ohio State's defense deserves a lot of credit for not breaking at the end there and getting the offense one more crack at it. And the ball of the night was Kyle McCord to Ibuka, like deep down the field. What was it, 3rd and 19? Was just bonkers. Like it was a big time throw. This game reminded me a bit of what Texas did to Bama, right? Where Quinn Ewers, we were unsure about to this point. All the talent, 5-star kid. He had his ups and downs, and then he just had he had some big second half dimes that.
But Texas dominated Alabama.
No. What I'm saying
they
is
were the clear better team.
What I'm saying is we looked at Texas as a national, like that was their, okay, they can win big games on the road against top 10 competition. They're a legitimate conference. They're a legitimate title team that can win the title. I think Ohio State doing that calmed a lot of people's worries about Ohio State through the first couple of weeks, where it's like, yeah, we can wonder about Ohio State and if this group is going to work. It's like, no, I think they're going to be just fine and be in the thick of things once again. So that's what I'm comparing them to Texas, and that win against Alabama was to go into Notre Dame, win an ugly game, win a game that you had no business winning against a very good Notre Dame team, and to have that final drive be what it was. And then like you get past the jet sweep call on 4th and 1, which was really embarrassing. That could have been lights out. You overcome all of those, and you already have the talent. The defense is showing up in a big way. We talk about Penn State's defense. Ohio State's defense is really good as well. I just look at it as like Kyle McCord is going to get better. Like he still only has a couple starts in him, and he had those big time throws that we've seen this before with Ohio State quarterbacks. He's going to get better. He's in a great system. There's talent everywhere. They have a top 3 roster in the sport. I think that's just one of those where, man, sometimes we just overthink Ohio State. And if you're Notre Dame, you're just sick, because you should have won that game, and you win that game 99 times out of 100 when you replay every circumstance. And I don't know. I couldn't imagine being a Notre Dame fan today, because that just cannot happen. And I don't even know how you regroup for next week.
No, it's definitely a heartbreaker, because, I mean, as clutch as that drive was, but like you have them at 3rd and 19, like you can't give up 3rd and 19. Like that's where, as big as the 10 men on the field was for the last 2 plays, it's like the 3rd and 19 is where the game was won, like that kept Ohio State alive, got the ball inside the 2-yard line. Like that was the backbreaker right there. But I feel like, you look at Ohio State, like I feel like at the end of the day, I think Notre Dame was the better team in this game and probably should have won, but Ohio State was able to pull it out. Like you said, there's sometimes you get these 17-14 games and, it's just no offense. It's like, I feel like you could tell both of these teams this game was just being played at a high level. Like this was just a big time defensive matchup, and both of these are, I think, going to be 2 of the best defenses in the country in college football this year. So it's definitely a big time win for Ohio State, like maybe the biggest win in college football so far this season. And while I think it's huge for Ohio State, the questions I had for them, like coming into this season, I think are still there. Like I don't think they could have won a game like this 3 or 4 years ago without the offense doing this much, but they look like they're constructed more like Penn State and Michigan are constructed. And if that's the case, they might not have the advantage in the quarterback room in terms of versus Michigan and Penn State. But in terms of what their individual playmakers are capable of, like if they're just going to get in this physical game of like the defenses are holding the other team's offense, at the end of the day, they have Travion Henderson and hopefully Marvin Harrison Jr. is healthy moving forward, and Emeka Egbuka. So it's like you have to feel a little bit better about Ohio State's offense than these other teams in the Big Ten. But yeah, I mean, it was massive for them, especially without Harrison for a little bit in this game. It was a huge win for Ohio State.
We also have to talk about after the game and the comments. Before I even mention that, Matt Green, I just also want to point out where, like, and this was in the family group chat that I was mentioning about Ohio State, where a lot of people hate Ohio State. I think actually more SEC fans hate Ohio State than Notre Dame fans, and I'm sure they were watching this game like, I wish both would lose. There's so many SEC fans, just fingers crossed there was a way for both these teams to suffer heartbreak.
Feels like Notre Dame fans don't have hate in their heart.
No.
Everyone hates them, so they're just glad when someone doesn't hate them.
Right. And they were the weird underdog in this one that I think a lot of people just liked, and they were like, oh, this is their moment. It did feel like they had more people behind them. But what I'm saying is 11-2, 11-2, 7-1, but that was the COVID year. 13-1, 13-1. That's all Ryan Day. Ryan Day doesn't lose regular season games. And you go back before that, you're looking Urban, 13-1, 12-2, 11-2, 12-1, 14-1, 12-2, 12-0. They haven't won less than 11 games, Matt Green, disregarding the COVID year, since 2011. And before that, they had another streak in 2004. So it's happened twice in 20 years, basically, that they've won less than double-digit games. Less than 11. Like, I think people just like to panic about Ohio State at the beginning of the year, every year. And part of it's their schedule, and they just seem like, sometimes they just seem to sleepwalk into these early ones. But they almost beat Georgia. They gave Georgia the best shot of anyone last year. I understand they lost C.J. Stroud and company, but like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emmanuel Abuka is just about as good of a wide receiver duo as you're going to get in the sport. Trayvon Henderson's healthy. They have multiple dudes. The defensive line is elite. They're going to have multiple first rounders on that front. I just think Ohio State is going to be right there. And I think if you watch that game, if you're like a Penn State fan, you're like, I was really counting on us putting it all together the year, like Ohio State having a little bit of a step back year. And I didn't get that.
I disagree. I don't think there's like a yearly, I don't think there's an annual panic about Ohio State. Like there's times where they play with their food and stuff, but for the most part, they drop 50 and all these 60 points in all these cupcake games. And I think that's why early on in this season, they're not really doing that. And the quarterback isn't like a surefire first round pick, like basically the last, I don't know, 5 quarterbacks they've had have been. So it's like, or at least three or four, right?
I mean, you got JT Barrett, Cardale Jones. You got.
But I'm saying you're going way back. We were going from CJ Stroud to Justin Fields to Dwayne Haskins. Like they're going on several years of first round quarterbacks. So if you just look at what Ohio State typically is, I think they're not that. So if I'm Penn State, like Penn State hasn't had the marquee game yet for Ohio State, but like from what I thought of these two teams coming into the preseason, like I still wouldn't say that Ohio State is better than Penn State. Like they have a better win on their resume, but I don't think you're necessarily panicking because I don't think Kyle McCord looks like that superstar quarterback. Like he might be good enough with what this Ohio State roster has around them, especially if this defense is as improved as they've looked through 4 games. But I don't necessarily think that this win over Notre Dame is like sending a message to Penn State and Michigan.
Okay. That's fair. Matt Green, let's go to Oregon, who just drubbed Colorado. And let me just say this. The conversation, everyone log off. Like all sports media, especially folks that don't watch college football before this Colorado resurgence, please log off. Like there's some media, I'm not even going to mention who it is right now, going back and forth and screen caps and all this. And you're just like, it's not that serious. It's college football.
Are we not calling them by name? Who's going on? Who is it?
I'd rather not because I don't want to draw attention to it. I'll tell you off air. People know listening to this who I'm talking about right now. But
is it Dan Dockich?
No, but it's anyway. Look, before the year, everyone needs to take a deep breath. And that's something that I think not enough folks are doing when it comes to Oregon, Colorado. Like obviously the lead up with Dan Lanning and the clicks comment and this, that, and the other. And I forgot someone who made that comparison of like, that's something Kirby, like in the locker room would say leading into a big game. It's like what any big coach would do. If you've been around football at all, it's like you find ways to motivate your team and you're trying to separate yourself from the team and make them the enemy. You're trying to do that each and every week. You're trying to find ways to motivate. They're also trying to play chess when it comes to recruiting. Like you want to make a statement, like you're recruiting against Coach Prime. He is going to recruit well. He's going to bring it. Like you have to find ways to be creative in this fashion because Prime's ahead of schedule and they're cool and they're getting a lot of eyeballs and doing a lot of things that make you wonder about where they're recruiting and what Colorado can ultimately be. All that being said, Colorado got pulverized in this game. And I picked Oregon to win. And my thing going into this game was like, is Bo Nix going to have a Heisman moment? Because this is his opportunity where a lot of eyeballs are going to be there for Shador. And Shador had to run for his life. That offensive line for Colorado is really bad. And he didn't have a great game. I think it was like 4.8 yards per attempt. But look, Shador will be fine. He'll bounce back. We've seen a lot of good from Shador. He'll be fine. The problem is, and what we talked about, is that the rest of the team was limited. The lines, the trenches on both sides. Like Jawan Mitchell is a linebacker who Tennessee had last year, and he was on Arizona State and then got kicked off or whatever. Right before the season, he's still somehow eligible, getting snaps for Colorado. Like, this is not a deep team whatsoever, especially in the trenches. Obviously, not having Travis Hunter hindered them slightly, but they were going to get blown out in this game with or without Travis Hunter.
They may have scored a touchdown or two if they had Travis.
But Oregon's a top 10 team. Oregon looks like a team that can make the college football playoff. They are ahead of schedule. They have better players. It kind of reminded me of Oregon, Georgia last year, where there's just like different tiers where it's like they're not there yet. Colorado can get there in a couple years, but they're not there. They're not in the blue chip ratio. They're not at a point where Oregon can just play bully ball and Oregon can just dominate you in a really aggressive way. Bo Nix had a fantastic game in this one. The Bo Nix to Troy Franklin connection is top notch. And I wonder, I just, Oregon's really good and the top of the Pac-12 is great. And I don't really have a strong, like, oh, Colorado was all frauds and all this stuff. And it's like, mess around and find out. People celebrating way too much about the Colorado loss and then people being weird about the Oregon win, like being way too into that. Here's what happened. Colorado is ahead of schedule. They're still going to be like a 7-5, 8-4 team. And Oregon looks like a college football playoff contender. Like, they're at different points in their trajectory. Like, it's all fine, but people just really blew all this out of proportion. A lot of that's the hype going into it. But folks, this is exhausting. We can't do this every week when it comes to Colorado. Like, they're going to lose to USC. They're going to lose other games on their calendar. Deion's still doing a great job. Colorado made a great decision in bringing in Deion. Deion's still good for the sport in a lot of ways. It's just silly. Like, everyone needs to calm down when it comes to Colorado and Oregon. I don't know if you agree with all of that, but it's just an elite team beat a good team with limited depth.
I think that was very well said, sir. I think you just look at what, and this is what we talked about, like Oregon was just a really bad matchup for Colorado. Yeah. Like maybe USC at home, you know, get to a shootout, like something can happen, but Oregon actually had the defense that's like, no, they just, at the lines of scrimmage, they're a different breed. And like, that's a good call too, how Kirby's talked about the Georgia-Oregon game a year ago. It's like, so matter-of-factly, it's like, well, yeah, they don't have close to as good players. Like, not even talking shit. It's just, that's the reality. But you're definitely right. Like, I really hate how the media has covered Colorado because they've turned them into the most hated team in college football. And it's like, this should be a feel-good story of like, Deion, high-profile athlete, has now turned this team into a relevant program in 6 months, basically, since getting in the job. So it's like, it should be a really good story, but you have so many people rooting against it. It's honestly like Tim Tebow. Like, Tim Tebow never did anything that's like actually worth hating, but you just talk about this man 24 hours a day and people don't want to hear what he ate for breakfast. You know, they don't care about it to that level. And it's basically LeBron James's curse why so many people hate him. Every time he tweets, it's a story on SportsCenter. But like, I was actually watching SportsCenter Friday night, and Dan Lanning was on there for a second. They asked him like 3 or 4 straight questions about Deion, like, oh, this little comment you made, was this a shot at Deion? And it's just like, what are we doing here? It's just, it's exhausting, really. And like, even Marcus Freeman was on game day, and they asked Marcus Freeman, like, what do you think about what Deion's doing out of Colorado? Like, what do you think he's gonna say? Like, oh, I think it's flashy and I hate it and it's bad for the sport. It's like, he's just going to say, oh, he's doing a great job. I respect it. Like, it's weird how, like, it's an awesome story, especially the fact that like his own son is involved. Like, let's play the human angle of it. But like, just the amount that's just talked about this program. And yeah, it gets, I don't know, it just gets too much. And I won't say I'm not like kind of glad that Oregon took them down a peg or two, so that maybe this isn't the lead story on game day every week. Maybe Colorado's like, hey, this is a good program, watch out for them in the future, like a Josh Heupel Tennessee team was or something like that. And you're not just anointing them. I'm saying year one, by the way. You're not just anointing them that like they're the next champions of college football. Like, let's let them build this up for a couple years.
Yeah. It's just, I don't see how this is sustainable. And also, like you said, they're not the villain. It's not like they're inviting, like they're doing things that get your attention. Like, that's what you do with that attention is on you and how you react. Like, you're adults. Like, there's so many adults just losing their minds in really embarrassing fashion about Prime and Colorado and then Oregon and everything else. It's like it's not a story.
And I'm definitely not one of those that's rooting against them. Like, I'm loving the Deion
but also
stuff,
you're weird.
But
if you're rooting against them, it's weird. Like, it's genuinely like I'm raising an eyebrow.
No, it's understandable to root against them because of what the media's kind of built them into. That like everyone's kind of sick of it. That's kind of my
Colorado's
point.
fault.
It's not Colorado's, just like it wasn't Tim Tebow's fault, you know. But it's like that's kind of what the media has created, and that's what's unfortunate because I am on board with Coach Prime and what Deion's doing, and I'm like loving like Colorado being back. But I did get a little satisfaction. I'm like, okay, just take it easy. Just you get a little big for your britches, you know. And it's like that's not even their fault. So
I didn't because the conversations after ramped up. So I'm like, oh, we're gonna do this all year. Like I was hoping that like we would have this come back down where it's like Colorado's not a playoff team. Like let's calm it down. Like that's what I thought was gonna happen. It was just this cool calm. Okay. They have a lot of work to do. Now we know where the tiers are. Like they're not in the Oregon, Washington, USC tier, but they are in the middle of the, like, could they beat Wazoo? Maybe. Like, are they in that middle tier of the Pac-12? That's great for year one. You just want to be in a bowl. Like, that's the whole thing. It just takes, just log off. Put your phone away, log off, take a walk.
Well, even more impressive to what you're saying is that we talked about the Pac-12 like it was going to be this conference of the haves and have-nots this year, that it was like a very defined upper half of the conference, and Colorado was not one of those teams. So if they actually get into that and, who knows, finish top 25 this season or just win 7-8 games, like it's a huge success.
For sure, Matt Green. Speaking of success, Florida State goes on the road and beats Clemson. Clemson now losing their first 2 ACC games under Dabo. Was that? I don't remember when that last happened, but it had to be a long time ago that was the case. But it was so funny because, again, where it's like it's interesting when I log in or I listen to other people who I respect and like just different things, what their takes are on certain stuff, and just to get a temperature for the room. I think sometimes you're like, wait, do we watch the same game? And this is one of those that I'm like, do we watch the same game? Where I came out of that like, oh, Florida State can't win the title. Like, this is not a team that can win against Ohio State and Georgia back-to-back. They're not there yet. Keon Coleman's a dude. Johnny Wilson had some big catches late, but like, they should have lost this game. Like, Clemson, I think you can make the case look better all game long. I think you would, if you play that game 100 times, Clemson wins 95 plus. And then everyone's like the doom and gloom of Clemson and what is Clemson going to be? How the sky is falling, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, look, man, I understand the offense still is sputtering and there's still not a lot of juice on that offense for Clemson. They dominated the trenches in this one. Clemson still has dudes on the offensive and defensive lines. Their defense is still elite in this sport. Florida State ran the ball 20 times to 22 yards against Clemson. If, as you talked about at the top of the show, if you don't have a kicker off the street who was like, working in New York earlier in the week, that's a boot. And we're talking about Clemson being back and Florida State not being ready. Like, it was those little things, and that will be forgotten about forever because it's just like, oh, Florida State went into Clemson and beat the Tigers. And it's like, yeah, but I mean, Clemson, I came away like, Clemson's fine. Like, Clemson's still a top 10, top 15 team. Florida State's somewhere around there, but anyone who came away from that game like, oh, Florida State, they're top 4 team in the country, playoff favorite. I'm like, I don't see that. The schedule is nice for them the rest of the way. Like, I would still circle Pitt on the road late, where Pitt would love nothing more than to do their Pitt things late in the year against the Florida State team. But like, I don't know if you had the same takeaway, but Clemson, I think, look, the Duke game was embarrassing. That was a bad loss. But I came away from this one like 2 top 10 teams, and Clemson should have won and looked like the better team most of the day. So it makes you probably more annoyed if you're a Clemson fan, but I don't know.
I don't know about top 10, but it's funny how the rankings work because I was kind of trying to figure out what my rankings would be. And I think I had Clemson like 24 or something last week, or 25. And in our AP poll culture, like, they lose to Florida State, they're out of the top 25. And if anything, they proved they were better than you thought yesterday.
Yeah.
If you think Florida State's, some people think the number 1 team in the country, like 3 or 4 first place votes, like Clemson is definitely better than you thought when you woke up on Saturday morning. So I just felt like this was a dangerous spot for Florida State. So I don't necessarily think it's like an indictment on Florida State. Like you said, Clemson is still a solid program, still a solid defense. Like they had 22 yards rushing and they found a way to win that game on the road. Like a lot of it was an indictment on Clemson, because I think at the end of the day, that lazy narrative is accurate, that this is about the transfer portal. Like we knew this was going to be a talking point after this game, with these two programs vastly different approaches to the portal. Like you could have used a kicker out of the portal, that's for sure. Like clearly there was some way you could have made your team, an inch better, a percentage point better, and maybe you could have won this game versus Florida State. And maybe that's the difference between you winning the ACC and going to the playoff. Like if you're a one-loss conference champion, now this team can't be a one-loss conference champion, and you have to look at Dabo's like approach to the portal. Like it might be like just a narrative that people don't want to get into, and because they did almost still win the game, but they didn't win the game. And Florida State's gotten how many starters out of the portal on this team? Like Clemson could have at least one or two that could make a difference. Keon Coleman, I know, could have made a difference on Clemson's side in this game.
No, and that's fair. If your main takeaway is like they need to, like the portal plan needs to change, then yeah, I'm 100% there with you. But I'm still not a sky is falling to the end. But like, I mean, even the kicker, I think they had a really high rated kicker and he hasn't worked out. Like I'm pretty certain he was a big time recruit and he has not worked out. So they had to do this off the street guy. So it's like, I don't know. We'll see. But like you said, the main takeaway here is Clemson's season's over September 25th. Like it's done. Like you can't make the playoff. You can't even make the ACC title game anymore because divisions are gone. So you now lose a tiebreaker against Duke. You lose a tiebreaker against Florida State. You are toast. You're looking like their season.
I'd say that's
over.
Not completely off the table in terms of getting to the ACC championship. Like Duke, we think they're a good team, but it's like it wouldn't surprise you if Duke lost 3 conference games, right? Like that wouldn't shock you. So North Carolina's looking solid, but like North Carolina's far from like a sure thing week to week. They looked solid this week, but it's North Carolina doesn't seem like just a solid team, but they still could own a tiebreaker over North Carolina if they beat them in a few weeks. And I think that's in Clemson, if I'm not mistaken, at home. So we'll see. I agree with you. I think this is still a top 25 team. Like I think they're still solid, but it's you got to do something. Because they're not top 25 was good enough under Tommy Bowden. Well, I guess it wasn't after a while, but this is uncharted waters for Dabo Swinney.
Speaking of uncharted waters, the Alabama Crimson Tide, wandering the QB wilderness over the last few weeks, Matt Green, they calmed some fears. And this was my thing. The reason I picked Alabama going into this week was this is a legacy game for Nick Saban. Like all the stuff that Lane Kiffin was saying all week long. If they lose this game, their season's over to an extent where they can't make the playoff. So you're looking at, and that's part of it too with Clemson. It's like no two lost teams ever made the playoffs. So the last 4 team playoff ever, it's toast. So it's just different for Clemson. What I'm saying for Alabama, they still have 1 loss. They beat a good Ole Miss team, hold them to 10 points in this one. It was ugly. Jalen Milroe had a bad pick, but they cleaned it up and the defense looked good. And for me, I think if you're a Bama fan, like you don't feel great, but Ole Miss, this kind of reminds me of a couple weeks ago with Texas or Tennessee and Florida, where it's like Tennessee fans felt good. Tennessee's a favorite. Obviously, you've struggled to get that monkey off your back going into Gainesville and getting a dub after 20 years, but you're the better team. You feel like finally we are the better team and we should be like, this is a down Florida team. And usually we don't have the talent advantage or they're just a better program, and you still lay an egg. And I think if you're an Ole Miss fan, you feel similar this Sunday because look, I think Jackson Dart and this team had a lot of reasons for optimism going into Tuscaloosa. And if you're not going to beat Alabama, this version of Alabama this year, when are you going to do it? So I think if you're Lane Kiffin, you're a fan of the Rebs, I think you're really just decimated and dismayed at what happened here, because that was a really, really poor showing. And I understand we can give a lot of credit for Alabama for taking care of business, but I still don't know if I'm all that convinced on what Alabama is. to this point, and I think it's just more. This says more about Ole Miss laying a gigantic egg to me than Alabama solving all of their issues and back to being a college football playoff contender. What say you, Matt Green?
Well, I would definitely see how Ole Miss fans could feel that way. Like, if not now, when? But at the end of the day, like, they still didn't have more talent than this Alabama team. Like, so I think this is why I feel like if there are Alabama fans listening out there and you want to know what's going on with the program, just listen to this podcast right here. Like, we got the pulse of this program right now. Like, this, because this is what kind of how I felt about Alabama. Like, they're going to be able to bully a lot of the teams on their schedule and have a really good defense that's going to shut down a lot of opponents. And this style with this team built around Jalen Milroe with actually designed runs, which Ole Miss did do a pretty good job of stopping Milroe on a lot of the designed runs. But you just look at how this team had to be built, and you can win a lot of games that way. But it's when you face the teams that have the NFL quarterback on the other side, or just the elite both sides of the ball. It's like, that's when I think Alabama's going to struggle, when the quarterback's having to make more of the decisions and more is on Jalen Milroe throwing the ball. But this is not what Ole Miss is. And I think that's why Alabama, you saw they were able to, McClellan rushed for 100 yards in this game. Like, you saw that they were able to just kind of, after that first touchdown drive, like, Ole Miss basically didn't do anything offensively. And obviously the fourth downs, like, Lane Kiffin's gonna go for it on a lot of fourth downs, and he had some success on fourth down in this game. But I think if you're Alabama, like, this is what I was trying to say. That's like, the dynasty's over, but this isn't rock bottom. Like, you're still a really good team, and they'll be able to beat a lot of the teams on their schedule. They could definitely still win the SEC West. Like, I'm definitely not going to say A&M or LSU is clearly better than them to this point. So my biggest takeaway from this game, and I mean, I feel like I've been saying it for a year plus, is that Ole Miss is a fraud. Like, they've been frauds. Like, Lane Kiffin is honestly a fraud. Like, this team, like, who has Lane Kiffin beaten since he took over Ole Miss? Like, what is his marquee win? Like, this guy he's 2-6 since being at Ole Miss against teams that finish ranked. And those two wins were 2020 Indiana and 2021 Arkansas. Not going to say anything about those two teams. They were solid teams those years, but they weren't great. And I think it was the game where Sam Pittman, they scored at the end and went for the win and didn't get it, lost like 52-51. It's like, that's their, like, he doesn't have like these Mike Leach type of, you can't count out Lane Kiffin, like they're gonna pop up and beat somebody. Like, they haven't really done that. You like look at the last couple of years too. It feels like they score so many of their points against the bad competition and just kind of pad their stats. And they're just, in SEC play, they're just so average. So I was never really bought in on Ole Miss, and now seeing, because honestly, I don't think Alabama's the clear number one in the West. Like, they could be the one in the West, but I look at Alabama, LSU, and A&M kind of all up there together, and like, this is just the first game Ole Miss has played in conference, and they scored 10 points. So like, yeah, scoring 70 against Mercer is cool, but like, your stats are going to look real nice, or averaging 50 points a game or something. But that's not what this offense is, and I think there's still a long way for Ole Miss to go, and I'm not convinced that like they're not in the bottom half of the SEC West at the end of the year.
Wow, bottom half?
I mean, you saw what Arkansas looked like against LSU this weekend in Death Valley. Like, they almost beat LSU. So it's like, I'm not ruling out that Ole Miss is better than like anyone in the West. Like, maybe Auburn, but like
Auburn, Mississippi State.
Auburn and Mississippi State, I would say,
and
but
Arkansas.
I'm not 100% convinced there. When do we got Ole Miss, Arkansas? Is that coming up soon? Because I'm not impressed with Ole Miss. This feels the same as the Matt Corral teams, where you score a bunch of points against the good teams, and then you kind of get brought down to earth against everybody else. But they got LSU this week, and then Arkansas the week after. So we'll see. We're gonna find out what Ole Miss is all about. But I'm not buying them. And at the end of the day, I feel like Lane Kiffin may be the most overrated coach in college football, because everyone just likes him. But like, what has he done?
Ole Miss, right? Like, you remember who you're talking about.
Yeah, it's Ole Miss. Like they're not a cellar dweller. Like Ole Miss has had plenty of history as a college football program.
History in what context, Matt Green?
They've been a competitive team they haven't won the SEC West before, but it's like
hold on.
They still haven't won it under Lane Kiffin either.
Like, who are you taking over him? Tommy Tuberville? Houston Nutt? Who is better? He's the best coach in Ole Miss history. What are we talking about?
There's no way he's better than Houston Nutt to this point, right?
Yes. What? He's won 10 games, 8 games, and he's on his way to another 8, 9. Like, this is year 4. His first year was a COVID year.
He might be on his way to an 8-win season, or they might go 6-7 wins. Like, I really don't know.
26-14 to this point at Ole Miss.
Is that good?
At Ole Miss,
they don't play anybody at a conference like that. They got 4 automatic wins
Tulane.
Yeah, Tulane is Tulane. Like
they were a top 10 team last year.
I mean, they finished top 10 in the rankings. We know how the rankings work. What did they didn't play? What, they beat one Power 5 team the whole season last year?
What are
Tulane
is what is the Lane hate?
Tulane is a respectable G5 program, but it's not like a big time win. Like if anything, it was a closer game than it probably should have been if you're a legit SEC team.
Oh my god. This Ole Miss take, I can't sign off. I think
if you're a truly ranked SEC team and you're playing Tulane, you should beat them by at least multiple scores.
I'm sorry. What?
Especially Tulane
watching this year.
Especially Tulane with their backup quarterback. Like,
Matt, have you seen the SEC this year? Everyone's struggling with everybody. Bama barely got away from a South Florida victory. Like, yeah, what are we talking about here?
And that's the Bama team that just beat Ole Miss by 2. That's the Bama team that just beat Ole Miss by 2 touchdowns. That's what I'm saying. Ole Miss should be worried.
Oh my goodness, this
Alabama could easily be the 3rd best team in the SEC West.
Lane
this year,
Kiffin
right?
deserves a lifetime contract at Ole Miss. Like,
if they're cool with his antics and how his PR with the program and his Twitter account, and he's fun and he's likable. If they're cool
great
with all
offensive
that,
mind,
cool.
He's a top 10 offensive mind in the sport.
I mean, maybe, but you look at what they've done. Look, the last 2023, they averaged 30.1 points per game versus Power 5 competition, 41 a game against whatever garbage teams they played out of conference. 2022 or 2021, they averaged 46 points per game against the garbage teams out of conference and 28 points a game versus the SEC. It's like it's a drastic difference when the competition is better. Like they're just, I feel like they're frauds. They're not that tight. Like I never believed in Ole Miss, and I feel like after this week, like I think we're gonna find out in the month of October that Ole Miss is gonna end up with it. They're gonna be leaving October. Let me see what the actual October is. That A&M is in November. A&M, luckily for them, they got A&M and Georgia in November. But you look at this team, they're going to have at least 1, if not 2 more losses in the next. I mean, they're not beating Georgia. They're not going to beat. I mean, I would doubt they beat LSU. They might get one of LSU or Arkansas, but this team's losing at least 4 games this year. I think 8-4 at absolute best. And if that's just the floor has been raised and you're fine with it, then that's fine. But they're not like, he's not taking the program to like a new level to me. Like I don't know. You could see it differently, but I'm not. It's year 4 now. It's the SEC. It's Ole Miss. Like, is he not supposed to win anything?
He's in the toughest division in the sport. What do you want from him?
And Alabama's down. That division is down right now.
We don't even know they're down. They still might win the West. They still.
They're clearly down. They could win the West, but they are clearly not as good as they've been.
They could beat Georgia this year and still make the playoff.
They could definitely do that. But I'm saying Alabama's clearly, through 4 weeks, they're clearly not as good as they've been in recent years.
Lane Kiffin, come on the podcast. Matt Green won't be a part of it. He will not be invited. This haterade has been.
I love Lane Kiffin as a coach, as a personality. He's an awesome guy for the sport. But I feel like there's a perception of how good he is versus how much people like him, and I think it's off.
Oh my god!
Great OC. Not gonna minimize anything he did at Alabama as an OC and everything, but I don't know. This obsession with Ole Miss, I think we kind of overrate them every single year.
Wow. Okay. That caught me completely off guard. I don't even know where to go with the rest of this podcast.
You disagree? You were impressed with the offensive guru and the 10 points they scored against Alabama?
They had a bad game. I started this whole thing with like they laid an egg. What was my takeaway? That like they missed their best shot. Like that's what I'm saying. Like that's a rough loss if you're an Ole Miss fan. But again, you're Ole Miss. Like you are Jefferson Pilot Sports personified for our entire you're over here like, is Jeremiah Masoli transfer going to be the one? Is Brent Schaefer going to be the one? Like, what are we doing? It took a
those
crazy...
Eli Manning years. They had some excellent years.
Excellent? Lane Kiffin? What? Excellent? What were they? 8-4?
They won 10 games. No, they won 10 games. Eli's last year.
Great.
It
took
2003,
a first
10-3.
All right. It took a Manning to get to 10 wins at Ole Miss. What are we talking about?
Hugh Freeze won 9 games, won 10 games. He may have been cheating, but that's not the point.
Yeah, that is the point. That you have to throw that out the window. What are we talking about? And then also, 10 wins once. 4-7, 7-6, 7-4, 7-5, 8-4. Lane Kiffin is going to be better than all of these guys. You go through it. It's like, what are we doing? Give Lane Kiffin time. Unlimited, but like, I won't hear for it.
5-5 year 1, 10-3 year 2.
Hold on, the year 1's are out. It's COVID. He started in COVID.
That's fine. 10-3 year 2, 8-5 year 3. And what if he follows it up with a 7-5, 7-6?
Great.
They lose the bowl game.
Who cares? You're Ole Miss.
I don't think he's one of the best coaches in college football if he's doing things like that. I didn't say one of the
best. I'm saying he's in the top 15. He's somewhere in there.
Maybe. I'm not sold. Not sold.
All right. I don't know what to do with this conversation. Matt Green, let's pivot to something that's not gonna just keep me all fired up in these late Sunday night hours. USC. I think you have a take on USC, sir.
I would say a nice little segue, Lane Kiffin to USC. USC is going to get beat. That's my take. Like this team is too flawed. Like Arizona State, like this team got shut out by Fresno State. Who was it? They lost to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State has been awful this year, and they got beat pretty handedly by Oklahoma State. So like Arizona State has not been good, and this was a game halfway through the fourth quarter. Like they were just going blows for blows. I actually did stay up. I think this game may have ended at like 2 a.m. It was a late one, but I was rallying. But yeah, Caleb Williams is like probably not one of his better games. I mean, statistically, it still looked pretty good, but this Arizona State was getting some stops, and they were just making. I think this defense is just not good enough to really get through this Pac-12 schedule. I think without at least one loss, I think this team's going to lose multiple games in the Pac-12. I mean, part of that's how good the Pac-12 is, and I think it feels like same old Lincoln Riley with like a less talent advantage than he had at Oklahoma. So I think they're going to get beat if they keep, unless there's an improvement on the defensive side of the ball. This offense is fun to watch. Zachariah Branch is like the next superstar, but I don't know. With what they have on defense, I can't see this team as being like a legit playoff contender.
Drew Pine's really bad. Arizona State was really banged up, but like this USC defense is not serious. That's why I was like, they're not a contender. We do this every year. Like the Grinch stuff is just never going to work. Like, so Connor Morissette, who covers USC at USC football, he tweeted out, ASU just scored a TD in a 5-play, 75-yard drive. This was a team that hadn't scored a point in their last 6 quarters coming into tonight. Like, what are we doing? We know how this is going. We know where this is. Like, you gave it 28 points. I mean, it's just, there's Washington's here, Utah's here, and even Wazoo could give this team problems, but especially with Cam Moore and the way he's playing to this point. And then Oregon. Like, it's just, you're not in that tier. Like, USC is not going to be in the college football playoff. Like, let's go ahead and get rid of that. This defense is not good enough. They are not good enough. And Lincoln Riley not making that change and not trying something else. Bear Alexander is not going to fix the problem altogether in the portal. Like, it's it's just more schematic than anything because they have a lot of talent. It's not like they don't have blue chippers in the defense. It's just a lot of it's scheme and a lot of it's just a stubbornness on a certain play style on defense. It's just not. It's going to limit what they can ultimately be, and it's just going to be kind of a waste here for Caleb Williams at the tail end of his college football career. On a happier note, can I throw this out before we hit on our teams here to close things out tonight, Matt Green?
Yeah, hit me.
I think Spencer Rattler is the best quarterback in the SEC this year. And this was not something I had before the year. It's why I'm so curious as to why Tennessee opened as 11.5-point home favorites over South Carolina this week. We'll see what to make of that. But I don't know if you watched any of Mississippi State, South Carolina late on Saturday. But
yeah, what did he start? 18 for 18 or something?
He went full Grayson Lambert over there, Matt Green. And Rattler is just dealing, and he's dealing deep. There's like something amazing about what Spencer Rattler is doing to this point, and it's scary. Like, he has a terrible offensive line, and this dude is dealing. When Spencer Rattler's rolling, there aren't many more fun quarterbacks to watch, and he takes deep shots. Like 18 of 20, he finishes for 300 yards, 14 yards per attempt. Like, that's bonkers. No picks, no anything. Like, Spencer Rattler, and this is a good Zach Arnett defense. Like, Mississippi State has problems, but it's not really on defense to this point. But they have a lot. They're older. There are a lot of vets on this defense, a lot of returning starters. And he completely diced him up. I understand playing at home at night in South Carolina, as someone who just experienced that last year, what that's like. It's tough. But Spencer Rattler in South Carolina, their record is not indicative of where they are as a program. They've been banged up with injuries. Obviously, you take Georgia to the woodshed in the first half there, and you can't hold it together for 4 quarters. But, like, hey, great performance on the road in Athens. I don't know. I don't know if you agree with this, but I think my takeaway through 4 weeks of the college football season, Spencer Rattler is the best quarterback in the SEC. And I think if he was behind, like, if he was on a better team or a team that didn't have the kind of schedule that South Carolina had through 4 weeks, I think he would be highly talked about to this point in the year as a Heisman type of guy, because he's having an individual Heisman type year, and he's really quietly bounced back and he's picked up right where he left off at the end of last year.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. And I think that's why last week I was like, I know this, I'm going to sound like a homer because this guy had a good game against my team, and now I'm going to hype him up. But it really felt like Spencer Rattler is kind of taking his game to the next level. So, and I think part of it's like there's a lot of uncertainty with a lot of these SEC quarterbacks. But to this point, I'd say you kind of have to be the most impressed with him compared to any of the other quarterbacks in the SEC. And Xavier Leggett, that dude is an absolute monster. Like, he's got some DK Metcalf in him. Like, he's like 6'3", like 230, and that dude can move. So that's gonna be a tough one to stop for Tennessee next week. But yeah, South Carolina definitely looks improved, but I'm not sure we're actually gonna see it in the win-loss record at the end of the season.
I agree. Last one real quick before we hit our own teams, Matt Green. Peyton Thorne was really bad at Auburn. That offense is in shambles. I would sell the Auburn Tigers the rest of the way here. I think this Peyton Thorne, it's also one of those late portal additions, and people just penciled in Auburn good, and like Peyton Thorne, could he be a plug and play? And Hugh Freeze, still a good offensive mind. I'm still not worried about Auburn long term, but I think the rest of this year they were exposed in a major way against top 10 competition in Texas A&M on the road. 6 of 12 for 44 yards, 3.7 yards per attempt for Thorne. They only ran the backs ran for 3.5 yards per carry. And Texas A&M outside of the hilarious Jimbo being on the field during a scoop and score in this one. You lose Connor Wegman to what looked like a bad injury. I hope that's not a long-termer, but it looked like a pretty gruesome, and he was like screaming in agony with the ankle injury. So I don't know what that means, but Max Johnson, fully capable of keeping this thing afloat. But nice win for H&M to take care of business. But I think Auburn is sneaky in a lot of trouble on offense the rest of this year, because I don't think they have the answer at quarterback yet.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good call. I think I'm not sure what exactly to make from A&M. Like, can Max Johnson, like, this offense started to move a little bit better once Max Johnson came to the game. So I don't know, but it's a nice luxury to have a solid backup. But yeah, I think Auburn, they got some problems. But the amount I saw Robbie Ashford in the game on Saturday, I was just thinking, oh boy, they don't know what the fix is at quarterback.
No. Well, Matt Green, your team played UAB Saturday night. Didn't watch a whole lot of this one, so let the good folks know what happened with the Dogs as they continue their undefeated streak. And Kirby Smart breaks a big time record with Bear Bryant, Nick Saban and company with one of the better start than any of those guys.
First 100 games, and those records they were showing for those guys were their first 100 games at Alabama, not their actual first 100 games as a college football coach. But yeah, Kirby Smart broke both of those guys' record, 85-15, in the first 100 games as a head coach, which is like an NCAA record. So big time stuff. Kirby Smart, just GOAT status already. No. But he's got Georgia moving in the right direction, obviously. This UAB game, it felt like it was another one of those where Georgia just wasn't like super crisp coming out of, was it 7-0 at the end of the first quarter? Like it was fine. It felt like the announcers went into this game like wanting Georgia to be bad and wanting to talk about it. Because me and my brother were just joking. It was like 7-0 at the end of the first. Like, what is wrong with Georgia? And it's like 5 minutes later, it's like 21-7, like I don't know, it was 28-7 I think until UAB scored late in the first half. But it was an odd like conversation. But I think Georgia took care of business. Like Carson Beck, I think that's what a lot of people should be talking about. Like he's through the first 4 games, like the offense hasn't been just super smooth the whole time, but like think about when Stetson Bennett was the quarterback. Stetson Bennett did not put up his best numbers against the G5 schools. Like it was the college ball playoff games. It was the Tennessee game. It was these actual big time ranked performances. The Oregon game. Like that's when Georgia actually opened the playbook and you could really see what they can do. Not making that an excuse, because obviously the South Carolina game, they were actually legitimately struggling offensively. But through the first 4 games, this guy's throwing 6 touchdowns, 1 pick, completing 72% of his passes, throwing for almost 300 yards a game. Like Georgia's had a very productive passing offense through the first 4 games against nobodies, but it's still been there. He's done all he can really do. And I think the biggest thing is this guy can move a little bit. Like I think most people thought that this guy was just kind of a statue, but he's already in these first couple games has made a couple plays with his legs that really surprised you, and you kind of didn't expect that from Carson Beck. But I think this game, you got to see a little more Brock Bowers. He was getting fed in this one, so that's always a good sight, because when Brock Bowers is going, this Georgia offense is cooking, basically. So I think 21 points, definitely more than you want to see Georgia give up in one of these games, but I think it was like in the third string defense in the fourth quarter. So 49-21, like it was not the most exciting game, but it's like as much as we can learn from a game like this, it's like it was fine. Like the running game, like you still got to worry about how shallow the backfield is, but Dejon Edwards, I think, has kind of solidified himself as the number 1 guy in this running back room.
All right, I like it.
The last thing I'll say, for the 4th game in a row, Georgia's completed the ball. Double-digit players have caught a pass for the 4th week in a row. And I think that's the biggest thing with Georgia's they're super deep. Like obviously some of it's garbage time, guys getting in, but a lot of it is it's Ra Thomas. It's Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint had multiple big plays in this one. Dominic Lovett, you see, obviously Brock Bowers, and then even Arian Smith had another one. And in this game too, is 49-21. Beck missed a wide open Jackson Meeks. It would have been like a 60-yard touchdown in the second quarter. For all the Bobo people out there that want to hate on the play calling, sometimes it's the execution and not the OC. And then there was another deep shot that could have been another 60, 70-yard touchdown that Arian Smith just straight up dropped. So this offense is not only has it been scoring a lot of points, but I think Beck has definitely shown that like this offense has like that take the top off the defense ability. And so I think we just all want to see Georgia play somebody. And it's like 4 weeks in, it feels like Georgia's season hasn't started. They're still number one. I'm kind of surprised in the like kind of how unanimous it still is. Like there's obviously some first place votes out there, but as far as the AP poll, it's like there's still about 90% of the first place votes are to Georgia. So it's hopefully at Auburn, and then we'll see the schedule ramp up here in a few weeks. But yeah, it's just been a little boring so far, and you don't really know what to make of how good this team really is.
There you go. On the Tennessee side, I'll just say, look, the score is not completely indicative of what happened in this one. UTSA had a great third quarter. Tennessee just came out of the half very sluggish. I mean, Joe Milton having an 81-yard touchdown run on the first play was not something I had on my scorecard. Like, I didn't think that was possible for Joe, but it was a great way to start. Tennessee started strong. It was what Tennessee looked like the last 2 years. Was the first quarter, was jumping on teams early, putting them in a hole and putting a lot of pressure on them in a raucous environment. Nealon was going. And it's just a really tough place to play when you're playing behind the sticks early, behind the scorecard and everything else. But Dylan Sampson had a gigantic day, and that was a big one because he didn't get a carry against Florida, and a lot of folks were wondering why that was. And he had a big breakout game. So I'm curious what the running back rotation looks like there with him, Jabari Small, and Jalen Wright, who got banged up. A lot of injuries in this one for Tennessee is kind of concerning, so we'll see what happens there. Now it looks like Cooper will be back for South Carolina, the longtime starter for Tennessee at center. That's going to be huge to get him back and get this offensive line as close to full strength as humanly possible. Brew McCoy and company look great, but there were still some misses. Joe had a really bad stretch where he missed, I think, 9 passes in a row, and that was a lot of that late in the second quarter and going into most of the third. And then he gets banged up with his knee a little bit, and we were like, because he fell in a really rough way that looks like kind of looked like what Tom Brady did when he tore his ACL, the way he gets crunched there going down. But thankfully, it looks like he'll be all right. But the defense just could not get off the field again on third down. Made a backup quarterback third string quarterback look really good against them in that one. But it's hard to take too much away from what the defense did, especially the secondary that played really well. Like, this was not a great UTSA team, and not like a UTSA team you can glean too much from. But my eyes went to Spencer Rattler, where I'm like, he's coming into town. We saw what Florida did against the secondary. Being at home is a big part of this. Like, if you were going on the road, like, you couldn't pay me enough money to put money on Tennessee to beat South Carolina on the road this year. At home, they're just a different team because guess what evaporated this week, Matt Green? The pre-snap penalties. They had, I think, 1 in this game. Like, they're a different team at home, where you don't put yourself in 1st and 15 because of crowd noise and everything else and having to check things and change the play at the line. They're just so comfortable there. I think Heupel is just going to have a really crazy home winning record because it's just really, really hard to beat Tennessee in this kind of offense when they're in their own building. So I'm curious to see how that. I think that's the reason that it's an 11.5 point spread for the Vols against South Carolina, because I think it's just really hard to beat this team offensively when they don't beat themselves, if that makes sense. I think the floor is just really high at home for Tennessee. Now they got to clean up stuff on the road, like at Georgia, at Florida, everywhere else, at South Carolina. But at home, this team is still just, when they're clicking, they had 4 touchdowns in like a cumulative 5 minutes here. And this one, like, that's the bread and butter. Like, that's the best version of Heupel's offense. So we saw the best version again in this one, which was good. But we'll see if the secondary can hold up against South Carolina on Saturday night. I'll be there. My dad is coming up for that one, so it'll be dark mode. Tennessee wearing the dark mode uniforms for this one. And,
oh, is that right?
Yeah, and I'm just worried about the atmosphere because this has a lot of 2021 Ole Miss vibes to it, with the mustard bottles and the golf balls and everything else. Because
what is that? Just the intensity of the fans. The
rivalry
factor?
Is strong. Fans really don't like Shane Beamer, and South Carolina fans really don't like Tennessee. And the last 2 games have been blowouts on both sides. And what South Carolina did last year to end Tennessee's year, it's just bad blood. There's a lot of bad blood with this one, and I'm just kind of worried about a full day of a lot of folks drinking all day long in Knoxville for this one, and heading into the stand if this one gets tight. I'm a little concerned about how this one will go, Matt Green. I'm not going to lie.
11.5-point favorite too. That's well, we shall see, sir.
Well, there you go.
Here,
Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I got one final thought here. I got to give the basketball blue blood update. So we lost one this past week. UCLA Bruins, that's going to happen. They faced a better Utah team, so they're a basketball blue blood that's no longer undefeated. And so the rest of them, they all are still undefeated. Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina. But it's going to end next week. I'm afraid all of them, except for North Carolina. They got a bye week next week. But Kentucky's got Florida, Kansas has got Texas, and Duke's got Notre Dame next week. So we'll see if any of those blue bloods can get out of next week. I'm doubtful. So North Carolina might be the final one left.
There you go. Matt Green, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you in a couple days.
Yes, sir.